Welcome into the Ostrom Avenue podcast. AJ Myers alongside Griffin Bloomstein. The semester here at Syracuse has concluded. Griffin, are you feeling relieved now that another semester has gone by?
Well, I would feel relieved if I didn't have any work to do, but I still have one
Oh,
final assignment that
wow.
I have to click submit on, which,
Coming
it
down to the
doesn't feel
wire.
over until that is over. Um, but we're getting there. It'll get done, so that's what's good.
If you're watching on YouTube, you'll notice background a little different for Griffin.
A
Griffin
little
is
different. We're back in
back,
the childhood room,
back
Still got
home.
the things on the walls and
Yes, gotta love it. Back home cheering on his Celtics, who I think are in big trouble after a shock defeat. I turned the game off in the third quarter, Griffin, because I thought it was over. Little did I know.
I
Not.
Yeah, fell asleep on my couch. That's how mad
Mm,
I was. And I woke
wow.
up after the Nuggets game ended and didn't
That was a
even
good
see
game
any of
too.
that. I was a little, I wasn't mad because I'm really not worried at all. Like
Really,
the
not at
Celtics are
all.
just gonna, no, I mean, look how they played so bad, like really bad. They missed 45 threes and they only lost by three
Yes.
in overtime. Doesn't scare me at all.
Almost as if the
Uh,
team was filled with Chris Bells. That was an
uh,
unnecessary Chris Bell shot.
okay, okay. That was out of pocket.
The NBA playoffs, though, have been thrilling. I've
Yeah.
enjoyed watching them. My Sixers are not in it. And honestly, it
Oh.
makes it a little bit more enjoyable because it's just one less thing to worry about. I don't have to worry about the team falling out in the second round like we've had to do every year in the past. Well, last year was the first round, but outside of that, weather-wise, it's been awful here in Syracuse. It's rained just about every day. Recording this Wednesday afternoon, and it's raining. Is the weather any better up there, Griffin?
No, when I got home Monday, 2 days ago, yesterday it was very bad out.
Hmm.
Today, I don't know, I haven't left the house today, but it looks like it's pretty nice outside. I think it's supposed to be decent the rest of the week, and then making my return to Syracuse. You already left. Why the heck would you come back? But someone encouraged me to come back, so we're coming back. It doesn't look like it's going to be too awful over the weekend,
No, weekend looks nice for
which is
graduation.
exciting.
And the reason why Griffin is coming back to Syracuse is because it's playoff time for lacrosse. But before we talk about who the men's team is playing, they're playing Harvard. We have to talk about the weekend they had. I mean, talk about good weekends. Syracuse men's lacrosse had arguably maybe Gary Gaits' best weekend ever as head coach of this team. First, you beat Notre Dame again in a wacky game that has a weather delay. Team goes unfazed by that, pull out a big win, and then dominate Duke, really, from quarter one to four, put out a complete performance against the Blue Devils and thoroughly win the ACC tournament or ACC championships. And then, of course, no automatic bid, but really helps them and gave the selection committee really no choice but to seed them and give them a home game on Sunday against Harvard.
I would like to apologize
Yep.
to the ether or the internet or whatever. Last week's podcast, I said
We're
that
down. We
in
both were.
order
We both were.
in order for Syracuse to win, they would need to get off to a 3-0 start, have Jimmy McCool be on his game,
Which
and
he
for the
was.
offense to not let up. And in that first game on Friday, right? It was Friday? Yes,
Yep.
Friday. Against Notre Dame, all three of those things happened. Now, I was correct in my prediction that if they were going to win, that was the path. But I did say there was no shot all three things were going to happen at the same time. I apologize. I sincerely take my statement back. Syracuse did it. Congrats. I was a bit wrong. I'll own up to it. Our good friend in WAER sports staff member Jake Klein was very quick to mention to me that I was wrong in my take. I don't think I was wrong. I think I was a little early,
Mm.
potentially, or a little late, maybe. I don't know. Whatever you want to put it. Syracuse played well. They started off hot. Jimmy McCool looked like the best all season, stopping
He was brilliant.
literally everything.
Both
Uh,
games. He was
yeah,
excellent.
John Mullen was playing
Excellent.
like the best in the country. Syracuse's offense at times looked really good. The defense played exceptionally well in both games. I mean, this is the momentum that you want to see. After the lowest of lows for the
Yep.
past couple of weeks, Syracuse lacrosse looked like the best all season.
It really did. And the player I want to highlight is Owen Hilt. I thought In recent games, yeah, he was putting up the points, but it just felt like he wasn't making the same impact as he had been in especially the start of the season. He was excellent, especially against Notre Dame. He had 6 points in that one. He followed that up with 2 goals against Duke. And really, it was a collective effort. There's so many guys. We talked about McCool, Mullen. I mentioned Hiltz. It wasn't just the Joey Spalina show, or it wasn't just one player, carrying this group to the finish line. It was a complete performance, and in either of these games, you never were that concerned. I know Duke, I mean, came so close to tying it on a Sunday in the final game, with a few seconds left. But Jimmy McCool stands his ground and comes up with that big save. But either way, you just had confidence throughout the game that this team was, every time it got close, they would still have the ability to close it out and get the win.
There was the goal at the end of the first half that Duke scored with like
Yeah.
a second left. There was that bad, what I thought was a bad call, which gave the Duke the ball, and I was like, okay, they're gonna score here. Like that's inevitable. And
Mm-hmm.
then that made it a 2-goal game. If Syracuse was up by 3 at the half, not just 2, then I would have been like, okay, this game is definitely over. But it just seemed like in that second half, Syracuse was just in control and in control the whole game against Duke. And that's kind of what like set it apart. Like Syracuse has been playing from behind in most games, having to crawl back, and at times they've shown that they can do it. But in the game against Duke and against Notre Dame, Syracuse was just in control, which was nice to see.
It certainly was. And during that Notre Dame game, it was, a lot of scoreboard watching because it's kind of funny the way the weekend went. You started out on Friday thinking Syracuse needs to win this game against Notre Dame to even have a chance to make the tournament. And as you're watching that Notre Dame game, Cornell and Yale are playing in the Ivy League semifinals. Yale is not a good team. I think their record was 5-7 going into that game against Cornell. I want to say they were down by 2 goals or they had a 2 goal lead. And that was like, uh-oh, like if Yale wins, then if they steal a bid, that's doom for Syracuse. And then the other big problem was Army lost to Colgate. Shout out Colgate. We interviewed their head coach a few weeks ago. Encourage you to listen to that one. Fantastic Colgate team. Love watching them. They pull off the upset over Army, and then they go on to win their conference. So they steal a bid. They're going to play Penn State in Happy Valley on I guess, yeah, on Sunday as well. I believe either Sunday or Saturday. So Colgate, it completely eliminates Army, which I think is probably the biggest debate in the looking at the entire bracket. Griffin, is whether or not Army should have still been in, because they had a good record. The Colgate loss was their third of the season. I think it came down to RPI. Their RPI just wasn't that good. The strength of schedule wasn't that good. Their only really good win was against UNC. So Colgate completely steals that bid. So as you're watching that game against Notre Dame, it's like, oh my goodness, like Syracuse really needs to win this game. They do. And then again, after you beat Duke, the committee has no choice but to give you a home game. Interestingly enough, it's against Harvard, who the first time Syracuse played Harvard, they lost. And I think me and Griff can both agree with this. I think Syracuse underestimated Harvard the first time.
Yeah, I think they did. I just also don't think they were on their game. And so that's kind of a big thing. I mean, going into Selection Sunday, it was between Harvard and Army. That
Yes.
was the consensus in the lacrosse world of who
And I
would
think
get
Harvard
in.
got it because of RPI, basically. I mean, and look at the
Yeah, I
strength of
mean,
schedule. It's just much
mhm.
better for Harvard.
And it's a very good Army team too, and so that's
Yes.
why it's kind of weird. And with all after Syracuse winning and Duke going winning the semifinal round, it seemed like those two teams were locks. And so with all AC with 4 of the 5 ACC teams getting into the tourney, it was just like, okay, who's going to take that final spot? And if you were you watching the selection show?
I watched the Syracuse part.
You watched the Syracuse part.
Yeah.
Okay. So when Syracuse saw the matchup against Harvard, the Harvard reaction was interesting. They
Yeah.
were ecstatic. They
Uh,
looked like they just
they won the whole
got
thing.
signed up to play a D2 team. Like that's
Uh,
how excited they were to play a Syracuse team that they had already beaten
mhm.
inside the
In the
dome
dome. Yep.
and to play the Orange again. Like they looked like they were on top of the world. And so I think that's just something that Syracuse can use. Like this is a Harvard team that wanted to play you. Like
Yeah.
the Harvard was looking forward to this matchup. And it's time for Syracuse to get revenge. The only way to get to the Final Four Just win 2 games. 2 games. And you have to start by beating Harvard. And obviously, it's Princeton on the other side, most likely, if Syracuse beats Harvard. And so, I mean, the ACC tournament is one thing because Syracuse knows these ACC teams so well. But can you beat a Harvard team that you had trouble with? Harvard's goalie is really good. Harvard's defense is good. They play smart lacrosse. Is Syracuse going to continue with their brand of lacrosse? Good defense, hustle. They hustled a lot in the ACC tournament. They were diving for balls. They were showing that extra level of intensity that you need to be a championship level team. And so it'll be interesting to see what Syracuse does. Syracuse pulls out the win. I think they will against Harvard. I think the ball needs to flow through. Um, get Owen Hiltz a lot of looks. Owen
Definitely.
Hiltz, he had 5 goals and 1 assist against Notre Dame, and then 2 goals against Duke. I think if you get him some good looks, I mean, he's one of the best pure shot shooters in the lacrosse world, in college lacrosse rather. And so I think him having a big game will help Syracuse.
It certainly will. And looking back at that last matchup in the Dome against Harvard, Syracuse, they lost 15-14. And the big storyline was the crazy face-off stat, which you still look at it and it's absurd. Syracuse won 28 face-offs. Harvard won 4, and somehow you lose the game. I think there's no way Syracuse can lose again. I don't think so. I think that was a fluke game. You underestimated Harvard. I honestly, it's kind of crazy. You listened to me last week. I had no confidence in this team. Now I have all the confidence in the world. I really think they can handle it. I think if Mullen dominates the faceoffs once again, which I expect him to do, he's done that basically every game. Like he isn't having an off game. Knock on wood that he doesn't have one now, but I don't see it happening. He's just dominating that well. Jimmy McCool's on another level right now as well. I think Syracuse gets by Harvard. I think it's pretty comfortable too. I think at home, I
Yeah.
know you lost to them earlier in the season, but I mean, it's a good Harvard team. Don't get me wrong, but I think they get by Harvard with really no problem. Unfortunately, though, then you're lined up which against who we think is going to be Princeton. And Princeton, RPI, they were first for a very long time. I think maybe Maryland leapfrogged them. But they're extremely good. They played a tough schedule. They played a tough Ivy League as well. They lost to Cornell, which was a back and forth game as well there. That Princeton game, assuming it's Princeton, will be a toss up. Regardless, we'll talk about that next week, assuming that's the matchup. But I have the confidence in Gary Gaits' group to get the job done against Harvard. And speaking of getting the job done, there were some players that got their next job in a way
Ooh,
yesterday in the
yeah.
PLL draft. 4 players were selected. Sam English, Owen Heltz, Michael Grace, and Carter Rice were all selected to PLL teams. So congrats to those guys and their next step in their now professional lacrosse world.
Yep. I was surprised that Owen Hiltz was the first rounder. I don't think many people had him going above
I'm
Jake
not. I love
Taylor or
Owens. You know that.
I know, but like Chris Kavanaugh and Jake Taylor are 2 really good players, and
Yeah.
um, surprised a little to see Owen Hiltz get drafted above him. I think the one thing, just going back to the Harvard game for a
Yeah.
second, is Jimmy McCool did not play well.
Nope. That was his
He was
worst game of
subbed.
the
He
season.
was subbed out
Yep.
after allowing 10 goals in 35 minutes. Jimmy McCool has not looked that bad the rest of the season. Like
Ever.
he is so much more confident. He's so much more skilled and just ready, I think, to take over.
Hmm.
That was the first, like, the Maryland loss is fine because Maryland's a great team. But this was the first moment and McCool only allowed 11 goals to Maryland. This is the first moment where McCool faced adversity, like
Yeah.
real adversity. And so for him to rebound and bounce back and just show that he's that guy. He's that guy for Syracuse is gonna be big. Um, Sam English going 3, I think that was like the expected pick that he was gonna go after McAdory and Kirst. Um, Interesting that he's gonna be teamed up with McAdory for Joe Spallina's Joe Spallina's squad. He's the GM over there with the
Yep.
California Redwoods. I believe that's their name.
Yes.
Um, So an interesting outlook for them. Also, Carter Rice drafted 4th round then Michael Grayson the third. So good for them that you got some guys drafted. I can only imagine how many guys are going to get drafted next year with
Yes,
that
next year is
junior
going to
class
be.
finally getting drafted.
Yeah,
It's gonna be
that's gonna be an exciting night for Syracuse next year. But again, focusing on the now, they got Harvard this Sunday in the NCAA tournament. Of course, last year Gary Gaits' group won their first round game. Wasn't super comfortable, but they were able to win it, and then they lost to Denver in the next round. We're assuming it will be Princeton. They play Townsend as well. Cornell expectedly they got the 1 seed. Were there any other surprises before we switch over to the women's side on the men's bracket for you, Griffin?
I was a little surprised Syracuse got the 6 and not the 5. I
Hmm.
thought it would have been interesting to see what Syracuse would look like on the same side as Cornell, but now Syracuse matches up with Cornell. It would be the championship game. But I think it'll be interesting that um, what the schedule looks like. It's a good Townsend team. They're probably a little upset watch
I don't think so. I
against
think Princeton.
Princeton. The only you don't think so? No. All right. It's interesting that the quarterfinals would be in on Long Island.
Yes.
So maybe Syracuse can get some Long Island revenge also
Yeah. They
um,
lost to Cornell
against
earlier.
Princeton if it goes out and beats Harvard.
Yeah.
The only other thing that I was a little surprised with, I thought maybe Richmond would be seeded instead of North Carolina. I mean,
Hmm.
because
Yeah.
that's a big thing. That's like I guess the 8 and the 9, if you want to put
Yeah.
it out there. Um, because now North Carolina hosts rather than Richmond,
Yes.
which is interesting. Gives them a little benefit. Um, some good seeds for the ACC teams, except Notre Dame. Notre Dame losing. Now having to travel to Ohio State, that's a very fun matchup
Well,
to watch.
that's my thing. I think Ohio State got sold. I think the fact, I mean, you win the Big Ten, then you got to play Notre Dame in the first round.
Yeah,
I mean, I get Maryland had a great season, but I honestly think they should have been ahead of Maryland. I would have had Ohio State at the 2.
really.
Yeah, so I mean, they won the Big Ten. What more could you have done from an Ohio State perspective? Um, and you
Yeah, I
just
guess that's
to get
fair.
Notre Dame in the first round to get the defending. I mean, I know they haven't had a great season, but still, to get the defending national champions, I think is kind of a cruel draw for the Buckeyes. But who knows? Maybe they'll win, and then they would either play Penn State or Colgate, who I think is interesting. And also, it's also interesting the amount of New York teams that are in this thing as well. Plenty of representation of the state of New York in the tournament. Flipping over to the women's side now, Syracuse women's lacrosse. It was assumed that they would make it into the tournament. Their RPI was good enough. They had a super tough schedule, so the resume was there. It was also assumed that they would not get a home game. They didn't get a home game. They're going to play Brown in the first round. And this course is this a Kayla Trainer group that has ended the season miserably. Terrible loss to Boston College, and then you lose in the quarterfinals of the ACC Championships against Stanford. Looking at the Brown side of things, they're a good team. They only lost 6 games this year. They qualified for the Ivy League tournament, which is just 4 teams. In that semifinal, they lost to Princeton Griffin 17-16. But at the end of the first quarter, they had a 7-3 lead. And then in the third quarter, Princeton won the third quarter 8-1. A bizarre game of just wild runs. The second quarter was tied 4-4. So I can say Brown kind of choked away a spot in the Ivy League championship to Princeton. They ended up losing. Now they have to play Syracuse. It's going to be a flipping confidence here. I have a ton of confidence in the men's side. Women's side, I don't have a ton of confidence in right now against Brown.
It's interesting because this is a Brown team that beat Yale,
Yep.
and Syracuse lost to Yale.
Yeah.
They only lost to Duke by 1, which you can say what you want about Duke, but that's still an ACC team that was ranked at the time. I think it's interesting with this program. As much as Syracuse women's lacrosse has been a historically good program, they only made the tournament because 29 schools make the tournament. Like it's not that hard if you're a women's lacrosse program that was ranked or is any good to make the NCAA tournament. Now, I think Syracuse ended up getting a favorable kind of side of the bracket. Obviously,
Yeah.
you match up in the same quadrant as Boston College, so exclude that. But Syracuse plays in New Haven. It's already been there before. Brown is beatable. And then you play the winner of Yale and UAlbany. Assume that's Yale. Yale's a team that Syracuse played close, was winning for a little bit of that, and then they kind of fell apart. Held Jenna Kalingman to a very bad first half, and then she kind of had a very good second half. But that's beside the point. These are two teams that Syracuse can beat if they play well. Now, do I think they will? Probably not. But it's a little confidence boosting that you know you can get past the first and second round and then eventually lose to Boston College in the quarterfinals. But I think just the message for this team or the focus should just be not losing to Brown. You
Definitely.
lose to Brown, and then there's just a whole nother can of worms that you have to deal with because, I mean, this is an all-time low for Syracuse women's lacrosse.
I disagree. I don't think it's a low. I just think it's a retooling season. So many incoming freshmen and so many players. Your best player, Olivia Adamson, misses the entire year as well. Could they beat Brown? Possibly. I don't think it's going to happen. I just don't think the team is in the right headspace this season. And again, I just don't think they have the right pieces. But I think next year they'll be much better, and Kayla Trainer will get back on track, and this program will be back in the top 5 of the rankings. So that's the storylines with the men's and women's lacrosse programs. Two massive games for both sides. Syracuse women's lacrosse taking on Brown. That's Friday at 4 o'clock. And then Sunday, Syracuse. It's a Sunday at 5 o'clock in the Dome. It'll be a quick changeover for the Dome crew, Griffin. All those graduations. They got Carmelo speaking that morning as well. And then they got a lacrosse game that afternoon. So an exciting
You think
time.
Carmelo's going to be at the Dome?
For the lacrosse game, yeah, might as
Yeah.
well stick around. Playoff lacrosse, it doesn't get better than that, right?
I would assume so, hopefully.
Who knows? But either way, it's going to be a really exciting time for both teams. Keep it locked here on the Ostrom Avenue podcast. We'll be back next week. We'll keep pumping out the episodes until both men's and women's programs seasons come to an end. So hopefully that's not until the end of May when both teams are a championship weekend bound. We hope. But who knows? Until then, though, keep it locked with the Ostrom Avenue podcast with me and Griffin. We'll keep breaking down everything Syracuse lacrosse related. Again, the men's program takes on Harvard Sunday in the Dome at 5 p.m. WAR's coverage gets going at 4:30 with McClurg remodeling, countdown to face-off, and then the double overtime all the way up until 9 p.m. You're going to want to get your opinions on the airwaves for that to break down whether it is a victory or defeat for Syracuse men's lacrosse. Regardless of the result, we'll have you covered next week here on the Ostrom Avenue podcast, breaking it all down. Until now, though, thanks for listening, and be sure to listen to previous episodes wherever you get your podcast or at WAER.org.